So let's talk about good versus bad text and images for Plasma. So what you really want to think about is what's going to survive and what isn't going to survive the cut. In general, the best way of thinking about it is that Plasma eats detail. Only really big shapes survive. So when you're designing your sign, think about things that could be seen or read from across the room. If there's too much detail, the Plasma cutter won't be able to cut it. If I scroll in here a little bit, you'll even see how it's quite precise, but you can see how the corners are still rounded, and in some spots it's not as precise as a laser cutter or when you're cutting vinyl, which is kind of the similar process that we're doing here. Okay, so let's start talking about what some good and what some maybe not so great fonts are for the CNC Plasma cutter. As far as fonts go, some Greenlight fonts, which are good choices, are fonts that are bold and simple. They have even stroke thicknesses, and they're often block or stencils style fonts. The thing to think about here is if the letters read from across the room, they're going to cut better on the Plasma cutter. Some yellow light fonts, which are workable but are going to need some changes, are fonts that still have an even stroke thickness and they're still quite simple, but they're maybe a little bit tougher to read from across the room because the stroke thickness, while being consistent, is fairly thin. We can change that in the design phase, but it's going to be a little bit more work. Some red light fonts that we want to avoid are not great choices. So these ones, the font stroke is too thin, or we have script or handwritten fonts. Some of these also have some decorative details that we want to avoid, and other fonts have some very thin interior pieces that are going to be very difficult to deal with. This even includes this font on the bottom. The stroke thickness is fairly equal. I could probably read this from across the room, but you can see that the interior pieces, like in the B and the A, are pretty small, so they're going to be quite difficult to deal with. When it comes to images that work really well for the Plasma, some Greenlight choices which are good to cut are silhouettes, some simple logos or icons. And in general, they're only one color because the Plasma only cuts in the end in two ways. When you look at the sign, there's either material or steel where it's cut, or there is the absence of material or steel that you get to see right through. There's no in between. So silhouettes and this style graphic works the best. Again, think of it as something that you could see across the room and still recognize it. That's what we're going to be looking for. Here's a yellow light image, which is something that we can work with, but we're going to need to proceed with some changes. So this is still very simple. It's only two colors, either black and white, and it's for the most part fairly simple, but there are some more detailed items like in the fins of this fish that are going to require a little bit of work in Illustrator to make it be able to cut on the Plasma cutter. What we really want to avoid is something that has way too much detail. So an image like this, there's too much detail, and the Plasma cutter is just too coarse of a cutting tool to be able to cut out all of this detail. So, I mean, really what we're thinking about is, when we're thinking about images, we're thinking about shapes that imply an image. We're not thinking about images that have lots of detail. Remember, the Plasma eats detail, so big shapes that are simple are the ones that survive.